The year is 753 BCE. Legend says that Rome, the greatest city in the world, was founded by a set of twins raised by a she-wolf. That's probably not true. But what is true is that by the year 0, the little village on the banks of the Tiber River had grown into the most powerful empire the world had ever known. Welcome to Rome. We'll get to that wolf thing later. First things first, how did a small Italian town grow into the Roman Empire? Well, Rome started as a small kingdom on the Italian peninsula. Ancient historians tell us about 7 kings ruling Rome, from the legendary Romulus to the last king, Tarquini Superbus. But most of these stories are shrouded in myth. What we do know is that the last king, Tarquin, was a bit of a jerk. He treated the Romans like a personal fiefdom, taxing them and abusing his power. Eventually, the nobles had enough and kicked the royal family out, establishing the Roman Republic in 509 BCE. The early republic was a wild ride. It was a new form of government that was not quite democracy and not quite autocracy. Power was shared among an elite group of nobles, the patricians, and assemblies of citizens. The commoners, known as plebeians, had more rights than in other cities, but still couldn't vote or hold certain offices. Most were excluded from public life. Still, for its time, Rome was pretty progressive. Slavery was widespread throughout the ancient world. Even Rome's greatest enemies, the Greeks and Carthaginians, had slaves. But Rome did something different. Conquered peoples could become Roman citizens if they learned Latin and followed Roman customs. So Rome grew not just by force, but by choice. Throughout its early history, Rome fought 3 long and bloody wars against its great rival, Carthage. These were the Punic Wars. The first 2 were close calls. The second ended with Hannibal marching his war elephants over the Alps to invade Italy. But Rome held on. In the end, though, Rome crushed Carthage, absorbing its territory and taking control of the Western Mediterranean. Rome's enemies included outside powers like Carthage and internal threats like revolts from subjugated peoples. But as the Republic expanded, it encountered a new threat: disloyalty from within. Roman generals began seizing power in the name of the Republic. Marius and Sulla plunged Rome into civil war. The winner, Caesar, seized power and took the title dictator. But his reign of terror only lasted 4 years, because a group of senators stabbed him to death in 44 BCE. This period of civil wars and power struggles marked a turning point in Roman history. It shattered any hope of restoring the old republic and plunged Rome into a decade of chaos. In the end, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, emerged victorious and took the title Augustus. The Republic was dead. The Roman Empire had begun. Augustus ushered in an era of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, which lasted for about 2 centuries. During this period, Rome reached its greatest territorial extent and saw major building projects and cultural achievements. The empire stretched from Spain to Syria, from Britain to Egypt. At its peak, Rome controlled around 50 million people. The roads were crowded. Cities were noisy. But Rome's population boom brought wealth and power. But all was not well in Rome. Beneath the surface of this glittering empire, tension simmered. Rome's expansion into the east brought it into conflict with the rising power of Parthia. While in the west, Rome faced constant raids from Germanic tribes beyond the Rhine and Danube rivers. To manage this vast territory, Rome divided the empire into provinces governed by appointed officials. To protect its borders, Rome maintained a professional standing army of about 250,000 troops. Life in Rome was complicated. The emperor was considered divine, but below him, the government was run by a series of officials elected by the people. The emperor was considered divine, but below him, the government was run by a series of officials elected by the people. This included the consuls, the main executive officers of the state. Senators held significant power and were eligible to be called to the Senate. Although many were wealthy landowners, others were former magistrates or military officers. Below the senators were the equestrians, who were merchants, financiers, and businessmen. The lowest class was the plebeians, who were free men who could own property and participate in local assemblies. Slaves made up a quarter of Rome's population. They could be owned by individuals or the state. Though Rome's population was mostly Italian, it was a melting pot of people from across the empire. People of Greek, Egyptian, Celtic, Germanic, and many other cultures lived in Rome. They came for trade, war, exile, or as slaves. Speaking Latin, following Roman customs, and worshiping Roman gods was expected of them. Rome was one of the most densely populated cities in the ancient world. Its population peaked at around 1 million, including 250,000 slaves. Citizens crammed into 5 insulae, or districts, which were subdivided into smaller neighborhoods separated by narrow winding alleys. Many buildings were damaged or destroyed, but shops, taverns, and brothels continued to operate. Public places like the Forum Magnum, the Roman Forum, were bustling hubs of activity. The mighty Roman roads radiated outward from Rome, connecting the far-flung corners of the empire. This intricate network facilitated trade, travel, and communication, allowing merchants, diplomats, and soldiers to traverse the vast expanse of the Roman world efficiently. Trade flourished throughout the empire. Merchants transported goods across land and sea, connecting distant markets and stimulating economic growth. Major trading partners included India, China, and Africa, with commodities such as spices, silk, and ivory highly prized. However, as the empire expanded, managing such a diverse and extensive web of routes became increasingly challenging, leading to a decline in trade during the late imperial period. The climate in Rome was mild and sunny, but hot summers could be unbearable. The Tiber River provided fresh water, but its banks were often polluted by domestic waste. Romans dressed in flowing white robes and sandals, but wore protective clothing when working outside. Food was plentiful in Rome, with grain imports feeding the masses. Popular dishes included fish and seafood, poultry, pork and beef, as well as fruit, nuts, and wine. Entertainment was a big part of Roman life, from gladiator games and animal hunts to chariot racing and theater performances. The Colosseum, an enormous amphitheater, hosted these spectacles, drawing crowds eager to witness the blood-soaked spectacles within. Religion played a vital role in Roman society. Citizens worshipped a pantheon of gods, including Jupiter, Neptune, and Minerva. Temples and shrines were scattered throughout the city. As Christianity spread, it challenged traditional Roman polytheism, eventually becoming the official religion in the 4th century CE. Philosophy was highly regarded in Roman culture, with Stoicism and Epicureanism enjoying great popularity. Philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius influenced Roman thought and behavior. But even in the heart of the empire, change was in the air. Christians faced persecution from the pagan authorities. The cult of the emperor also gained prominence, blurring the line between religion and politics. Internal squabbles plagued the empire. Rival factions competed for power, destabilizing the government. Luxury, decadence, and a loss of civic virtue were seen as threats to Rome's stability. Economic challenges loomed. High taxes, inflation, and declining trade strained the populace. The Roman Empire reached its greatest territorial extent under the rule of Trajan in 117 CE, spanning from Britain to Mesopotamia. Yet this vastness proved to be a double-edged sword. The sheer size of the empire became increasingly difficult to administer effectively, leading to a decline in infrastructure and public services. On the frontiers of the empire, the military struggled to contain the incursions of Germanic and other nomadic tribes, posing a constant threat to the empire's security. Under Marcus Aurelius, Rome faced the Antonine Plague, a devastating pandemic that killed millions, decimating the population and disrupting the economy. Natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions also tested the resilience of the Roman world. In the 3rd century, the empire was rocked by a series of crises. Rampant inflation, civil wars, and external threats tested its foundations. Diocletian, seizing power in 284 CE, introduced reforms to stabilize the empire. He divided it into east and west, reorganized the army, and instituted price controls. Despite these measures, the crisis-ridden 3rd century left Rome deeply wounded. But as the Western Roman Empire stumbled, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, flourished. Centered in Constantinople, it enjoyed a golden age under the reign of Emperor Justinian. Renowned for his legal code and the construction of Hagia Sophia, Justinian's rule marked a high point in Eastern Roman history. But as the Eastern Empire thrived, the Western Roman Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. External pressures from Germanic and other barbarian tribes intensified, culminating in the sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 CE. This humiliation shook the foundations of the empire. Further weakening Rome, a series of weak or ineffective rulers failed to address the mounting crises. Internal strife, economic decline, and the relentless pressure from outside forces created a perfect storm that threatened to destroy the once mighty empire. Then, in 476 CE, the final blow was struck. The Germanic chieftain Theodoric the Great deposed Romulus Augustulus, the last Western Roman emperor, marking the traditional date for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Thus ends our story of Rome, from its humble beginnings as a small Italian settlement to its zenith as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. And then, despite its fall, its influence continues through the Renaissance and the birth of Western civilization. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments who comes next. Av.